We brothers from the same projects that got together to work on one project, to escape the projects. Let's do this, let's do this, let's do that, and it's Wu-Tang and it's just one big thing. It's like, it took years to build.
The special thing about Wu-Tang being 8 or 9 guys was each one was a rapper who can represent his own individual self within that crew. They were the example for all of us, because we didn't really see that before. Like, more power to them, and show love to them, respect them. You know, they're honorable. They gave us incredible skill. They gave us incredible poetry, and it gave us music that no one's touching to this day. It's timeless.
We knew it was gonna hit because it was too many of us. People didn't understand it at first, you know what I'm saying? We even took that and tried to shop it. You know what I'm saying? They didn't understand it at first because they hey, a bunch of black guys, they wanna be Grandmaster Flash, Furious 5, you know what I'm saying? That's how they took it. But watch me now, you know what I'm saying? And when we did Protect Your Neck, came out back, I knew it was gonna be that joint that's gonna make us rise.
And Wu-Tang, we came from, let's put it this way, we were what people identified with every day in the streets. We weren't the people that were on the MTV, Yo MTV Raps crowd, things like that. And to see someone up there that looked like you, dressed like you, didn't have money, and was struggling, and all they talked about was the struggle, people love that shit, man. They always root for the underdog, you know? And our first tour was a 15-passenger fucking van. We got per diems every fucking day, $35.
Fantastic?
Huh?
Fantastic was the van?
No, I don't know what the van was. It was just a big van, a 15 passengers, you know, with rows
the regular
of seats.
shit, the regular
you know,
shit. Okay.
we sleeping in
From
these shits, traveling from state to state, putting the grind in.
Right.
And at the end of the day and shit, it made us the artists that we are today. We didn't get it handed to us. We had to go out there and get that shit.
They respect a brother whose shit got to build up by itself. It has to have a start. You know what I'm saying? That's start from the bottom in order to get to the top. You know what I'm saying? And once you get to the top, it's only one way to go, and that's down.
Well, we ain't trying to go down, though.
Word up. So
You know
we just gonna keep elevating,
Keep
constant
rising.
elevation. Ain't no topping this to us.
Basically, man, Wu-Tang represents a sword style of rhyming, man. The Wu is the way, the Tang is the slang, the Clan represents the family, man. We call it a sword style because we are lyrical assassins, and we are aware that the tongue is symbolic to the sword. You know what I'm saying? So we work with it like that.
During the 1990s, a bunch of talent was growing and releasing some of the most iconic albums and songs of all time. Artists like Jay-Z and Nas were putting on for New York. Dr. Dre and Snoop Dogg was carrying the West Coast G-Funk sound, and the South was wrapping up and ultimately took over in the late 1990s with Outkast, Master P and No Limit Records, and Juvenile and Cash Money Records. But in the middle of it all, a 10-man team hailing from Staten Island took over the rap game during the mid-1990s. They came from nothing, the projects, the struggle, the hunger. Just a bunch of hustlers who didn't know that all of their lives were going to change, all because of one man, the RZA. Following the 5-year plan, the RZA opened up the door and carried the movement, dropping gems like Enter the Wu-Tang 36 Chambers, Takeover, Return to the 36 Chambers, Only Built for Cuban Links, Iron Man, and of course, Wu-Tang Forever. All of those albums I just mentioned were released between 1993 and 1997, and by then, Wu-Tang was hotter than ever. There was a #1 rap crew in the game, especially during 1995. RZA dropped 4 albums if you want to include Takeover, because it dropped late 1994. Method Man was a star collabing with Biggie and Redman, and Ray and Ghost was collabing with Nas and Mobb Deep. And Wu-Wear was going off and popping, making over $30 million a year. So by 1999, Method Man was starring in Belly, The Jamie Foxx Show, and having 2 double platinum albums with Takeover and Takeover 2000 Judgment Day. Raekwon, Ghostface, and Jizzle were gold-selling artists. ODB was a platinum-selling artist, storming the Grammys, and Expected Day, Capadonna, U-God, and RZA all dropped their debut albums during the end of the decade. So by the year 2000, Wu-Tang wasn't just a group, it was a movement. But no dynasty lasts forever without change. The new millennium brought a new challenge. The music industry was evolving, file sharing, shifting labels, new sounds. Radio at the time was playing more club records and embracing the shiny suit music. The Clan who once stormed the gates of hip-hop had to face a new reality. How do legends adapt when the world moves on? This is the story of the Wu-Tang Clan in the 2000s, a decade of reinvention, separation, tragedy, and endurance. The years where Shaolin swordsmen stepped into a new era, each carrying their own path, yet forever bound by the mark of the W. By the end of the 1990s, Wu-Tang Clan stood at the top of the hip-hop mountain. They had done what no other group had ever done before, turned underground movement into a global empire. They sold millions, told the world, and inspired an entire genre or generation of artists to build collectives, brands, and universes of their own. The late 90s were the empire years. Wu-Tang Forever had gone 4 times platinum in 1997, earning Grammy nominations and cementing their status as rap's most powerful rap group. But with success came space, and space creates distance. Every member was a star in their own right. They didn't follow the RZA anymore, and besides, he started aiming towards films and movies. Same as Method Man, they both got into acting. Money disputes, creative control, and the question of who led the clan began to loom large. The unity of the Thirsty Chambers days was harder to maintain when everyone had their own vision and their own label deal. By 1999, their Loud Records contract was coming to an end, and the crew had to decide what Wu-Tang looked like in the new millennium. Everyone either dropped their second solo album or dropped their debut album. But the rap game had changed already. No Limit and Cash Money were running the South. Jay-Z and Rockefeller Records had the charts. Eminem was exploding onto the scene with Dr. Dre, Diddy, and Bad Boy was dropping hits. And so the once dark, sample-heavy 90s sound was giving way to shinier, more commercial production. Before Wu-Tang released their album, Ghostface released one of the greatest albums of all time in the year 2000. On February 8th, 2000, Ghostface Killah released his second studio album, Supreme Clientele. The album debuted at number 7 on the US Billboard 200 and sold 134,000 copies in its first week of release. And by March 8th, the album will be certified gold. And in that same year, on November 24th, 2000, the Wu-Tang Clan would release their third studio album, The W. Despite the new and more polished sound that the radio was playing, RZA still intended for the W to still have the rugged, unpolished, and raw sound. The album's sonic atmosphere returns to the menacing, low-end driven approach that defined the group's early success. The W debuted at number 5 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 1 on the US Top R&B Hip-Hop Albums chart, selling 301,000 copies in its first week of release. The song Gravel Pit is the one that stands out the most, and the RZA said he even tried to experiment and try a new sound for the song. Also, fun fact, Aaliyah was originally supposed to sing the hook on the Gravel Pit song, but I'm guessing their schedules didn't line up and it never got to happen. But
No, that song was meant for Aaliyah. So,
For Aaliyah?
Yeah, we was in the studio. We talked about it, and I said I have this whole Flintstone concept. I'm gonna have you dressed up like
Betty.
Yeah, like Pebbles, but because Aaliyah was such in great shape and all that, and I just had this whole plan, and she was be like, yeah, we agreed, and it just things went yeah.
So she was gonna sing over that beat and everything, or was this wow.
Yeah.
But even as the album succeeded, some cracks remained. Not everyone was in the same mental space. Old Dirty Bastard was in and out of legal trouble, battling addiction and label issues. Others were balancing family life, business, and creative fatigue. It was the end of one era and the uncertain start of another. Now, those are all the albums that dropped in the year 2000. Now we're moving on into the year 2001. America just faced one of the biggest tragedies of the year, and hip-hop was moving faster than ever. Jay-Z just dropped The Blueprint, and Nas just dropped Stillmatic. The industry had gone digital, and the streets were still turning corporate, and the new generation of rappers, from Eminem to Nelly, were starting to dominate the airwaves, and the Jay-Z versus Nas feud had reached its peak. And in the middle of that chaos, the Wu-Tang Clan regrouped. Only a year after the W proved their power, they went back into the studio to record their fourth group album, Iron Flag. On December 18th, 2001, the Wu-Tang Clan released their fourth studio album, Iron Flag. The album debuted at number 32 on the US Billboard 200 and only sold 153,000 copies were sold in its first week, eventually going gold. However, this was the first Wu-Tang Clan album where ODB was completely absent from every song on the album. The absence of Old Dirty Bastard was impossible to ignore. Still dealing with legal troubles, label conflicts, and personal demons, ODB missed out on most of the recording process. His absence created a void. The unpredictable energy, the wild spark that had always balanced RZA's structure and Ghost's intensity was gone. This was the second lowest selling Wu-Tang album as Loud Records was on the verge of shutting down. budget cuts, internal disputes, and shifting priorities left RZA and the crew in a race against time to finish the project before label folded. Tracks like Uzi, Peak Ring brought that classic Wu chaos back to life, an explosive cipher of lyricism, aggression, and bravado. Rules, channel post 9/11 patriotism and street pride, and y'all been warned, sounding like a warning shot to the entire industry. Wu-Tang still stood tall, even if the world forgot. Now, shortly after its Iron Flag drop, Loud Records collapsed. Without a label binding them together, the clan started to move in their own directions again. Ghostface started with Def Jam, Method Man stayed with Def Jam, and focused on film and TV. Raekwon began planning his next project independently. RZA dove into Hollywood. The early 2000s marked the end of Wu-Tang's dominance as a single collective force, but not the end of their story. Fun fact as well, Capadonna doesn't appear on the album or the album cover, which was weird because when I was watching the Mike Cement documentary, he was there on set with the rest of the guys. If you search up the original picture or the original photos of the album cover for Iron Flag, it's going to be obvious that Capadonna was removed from the original cover. Now, this happened because after the W was released, Capadonna wasn't satisfied with being in the group. Capadonna wasn't happy that people on the outside didn't consider him as a part of the group and just saw him as an affiliate. Now, this was weird to me as well, because ever since Capadonna appeared on Cuban Links and Iron Man, I always thought he was a part of the original 10. He has some iconic and dope verses on each album as well, so he should still be considered as one of the main members of the Wu-Tang Clan. Now, speaking of Capadonna, he released his second studio album, The Yin and the Yang, on April 3rd, 2001. The album debuted at number 51 on the US Billboard 200 and 19 on the US Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart. On August 28th, 2001, the RZA released his second studio album, Digital Bullet. The album debuted at number 9 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 24 on the Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart, and reports show that the album only sold 13,000 copies in its first week of release. Now, last but not least, Ghostface Killah released his third studio album, Bulletproof Wallets, on October 16th, 2001. The album debuted at number 34 on the US Billboard 200, number 2 on the US Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart, and sold 36,000 copies in its first week of release. At the end of 2001, this will be the last year the Wu-Tang Clan would have its original members. By the early 2000s, the Wu-Tang Clan had entered a new chapter, one where the sword of unity had dulled, but the individual blade still cut deep. Each member moved according to his own rhythm, his own vision. Some chased the mainstream, but Method Man, for example, the early 2000s cemented his role as the most visible Wu-Tang member. After the success of Blackout with Redman, Meth became a pop culture icon. Music, movies, TV, endorsements, and constant features, but fame came with a cost. On May 18th, 2004, Method Man released his third studio album, Takeover Zero, the prequel. Takeover Zero, the prequel, debuted at number 2 on the US Billboard 200 and was certified gold by the RIAA on July 14th, 2004. The album received mid to bad reception due to the lack of cohesiveness, production, and the quality overall. It was rushed, a label-driven project that didn't represent him. 2 years later, Method Man will go on to release his fourth studio album, 421, the day after. The album debuted at number 8 on the US Billboard 200 and only sold 62,000 copies in its first week of release. This will become Method Man's fifth album that will hit top 10 in the United States. Method Man also explained the meaning of the title of the album. The national weed smoking date is 420, so I named my album 421 the day after, because after that day, you have this moment of clarity where you're not high and you see things clearly. And 3 years later, on May 19th, 2009, Method Man and Redman will release the Blackout 2 on the Def Jam. The album debuted at number 7 on the US Billboard 200, selling just 63,000 copies in its first week of release. Now, moving on to Ghostface Killah, Ghost was the one that carried the Wu legacy more throughout the 2000s. From the Pretty Tony album to Fishscale and More Fish, his run was absolutely legendary. He was consistent, blending vivid storytelling with emotion, funk, and street poetry. While others drifted, Ghostface stayed in creative overdrive, and critics noticed. He was often called the most consistent Wu member of the 2000s. Now, in this portion of the video, we're going to be going through every single album Ghostface put out in the 2000s after Bulletproof Wallets. And now, on April 20th, 2004, Ghostface released his fourth studio album, The Pretty Tony album. The album debuted at number 6 on the US Billboard 200 and sold 68,000 copies in its first week of release. August 3rd, 2004, Ghostface group Dido Unit released their first group project, 718. The album debuted at number 66 on the Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart and at number 38 on the Independent Albums chart in the United States. The following year after, he would release a collaboration album with Trife the God on November 18th, 2005 called Put It On The Line. Now, in 2006 was the year for Ghostface Killah, which is quite ironic because 10 years ago, in 1996, his first album, debut album, Iron Man, would make noise on the charts and sell over 100,000 copies in the first week of release. Now, on March 26, 2006, Ghostface Killah would release his fifth studio album, Fishscale. The album debuted at number 4 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 2 on both the top R&B hip-hop albums chart and the US top rap albums chart. The album sold over nearly 110,000 copies in its first week of release. Upon its release, Fishscale received universal acclaim, with critics praising the album's cohesiveness, lyricism, and production. In my opinion, the song The Champ, produced by Just Blaze, is one of the best songs on the album. Many of you may disagree with me and say Back Like That is the best song on the album featuring Neo, but nah, like The Champ is just a way better song. Now, in the same year, on December 12, 2006, Ghostface Killah released his sixth studio album, More Fish. The album debuted at number 71 on the US Billboard 200 and number 13 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart and number 6 on the US top rap albums chart, and it sold 36,000 copies in its first week, a huge decline to his previous album, Fishscale, that released earlier in that year. He also had a song with Amy Winehouse called You Know I'm No Good, which is probably the most recognized year. Ghostface will continue to release his seventh studio album called The Big Doe Rehab on December 4th, 2007. The album clashed with the release of 8 Diagrams, and RZA had to push the date back because Ghostface was in his feelings. Ghostface also explained the meaning of the album title to MTV News. I dreamt that I was in rehab, but for having mad money, me and a bunch of old white dudes. Dreams. You can't really remember the dreams, but I was someplace. I don't know if it was rehab, but it was mad money in there. When I woke up, the first thing that came to mind was the Big Doe Rehab. I took a list of titles and wrote them in my mind book, which I might use in the future. The Big Doe Rehab debuted at number 41 on the US Billboard 200 chart and sold about 36,000 copies in its debut week. Now, Ghost went on MySpace to express his unhappiness with the poor results of his album sales due to fans downloading the album illegally. In 2009, Ghostface was dropped his 8th studio album, Ghostdini, Wizard of Poetry in Emerald City on September 29th, 2009. The album debuted at number 28 on the US Billboard 200, number 6 on the top R&B and hip-hop albums chart, and number 3 on the US top rap albums chart. And that will be the last album Ghostface Killah would drop before the decade ended. Next up is Raekwon the Chef. Now, Raekwon enters the new millennium determined to reclaim his corner. After Only Built for Cuban Links dropped in 1995, expectations were sky high for his next album, but Immorality and the Lex Diamond Story didn't land the same way. The production lacked the cinematic grit fans expected, and RZA's absence was felt heavily. On December 16, 2003, Raekwon released his third studio album, The Lex Diamond Story. The album debuted at 102 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 18 on the US top R&B hip-hop albums chart. On November 10, 2006, Raekwon released Heroin Story. In 2007, he released the Vayasha Mixtape Volume 1 on February 27 and the Vashon Mixtape Volume 2 on September 25, 2007. On September 8, 2009, Raekwon would release his fourth studio album, Only Built for Cuban Links 2. The album debuted at number 4 on the Billboard 200 and at number 2 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart, while selling nearly 68,000 copies in its first week of release. In an interview, Raekwon called it the album that brings back the Purple Tape energy. Now, moving on to the RZA, aka The Abbot. He shifted from beats to the border horizons. He became a student of cinema, scoring films, studying under Quentin Tarantino, and building his Bobby Digital persona. After Digital Bullet, which released in 2001, 2 years later, he would go on to release his third studio album, Birth of a Prince, on October 7, 2003. The album peaked at number 41 on the Billboard 200 and number 20 on the top R&B hip-hop albums chart in the United States. But just a few months prior, RZA released a compilation album called The World According to RZA on April 28th, 2003. Now, in this section of the video, we're going to be diving deep into the films and movies that RZA orchestrated and scored himself. On April 1st, 2000, the soundtrack for Ghost Dog was officially released, which was an original score by the RZA featuring members of and affiliates from the Wu-Tang Clan. On September 23rd, 2003, the official soundtrack to Kill Bill Volume 1 was officially released, peaking at number 45 on the US Billboard 200 and number 1 on the soundtrack chart. The album was fully scored and produced and orchestrated by the RZA himself. Just a year later, Kill Bill Volume 2 in 2004 was released, and the official soundtrack would be released on April 13th, 2004, peaking at number 58 on the US Billboard 200 and number 2 on the Billboard Soundtracks chart. However, in this part, Tarantino's personal friend Robert Rodriguez helped score the film alongside RZA. RZA also had his hands in scores on Soul Plane and Blade Trinity in 2004 as well. Between 2007 and 2009, the RZA was scored the amazing soundtrack to the iconic anime Afro Samurai. RZA did both Afro Samurai the album and Afro Samurai Resurrection, and in my opinion, both soundtracks were amazing, like 10 out of 10. Some of my personal favorites are Nappy Afro, Fury in My Ivy Wrench, Just a Little Dude Who That Over There featuring Q-Tip, and We All Got. RZA really embodied and captured the essence and atmosphere of Afro Samurai, making a great anime altogether.
I still get busy in my nappy afro. My nappy afro.
All these tears I've had, and yet I know where.
Bodies in the streets, killing overhead. Marvel at the sky as it turns blood red. Peeling cats back to the white meat show. This is natural for the little afro.
Next up is The Genius, aka The GZA. Ever the quiet observer, dropped Legend of the Lucas Swords on December 10th, 2002. He then released a collaboration album with DJ Muggs called Grandmasters on October 6, 2005. Then GZA will release the fifth and last studio album called Pro Tools on August 19th, 2008. The album features the infamous diss track towards 50 Cent called Paper Plate. And not gonna lie, GZA killed 50 Cent with this one. Y'all should hear it. Capadonna would release The Struggle in 2003 and Slaying Prostitution in 2008. You God will release a group project, You Godzilla presents the Hillside Scramblers in 2004, and the second studio album, Mr. Excitement, in 2005. Inspector Deck would release The Movement in 2003 and The Raw in 2008.
We dance with the wolves, wrestle with the pit bulls, for fistfuls of dollars and cents. We empty pistols.
And finally, Master Keto will release his debut studio album, No Set Date, on June 1st, 2004. So, overall, each member was walking down their own path, carrying fragments of the Wu-Tang spirit. But the one thing missing was unity. The fans want another 36 Chambers moment and another 36 Chambers album. But the question still hung in the air, would the Wu ever come together again? The Wu-Tang Clan changed hip-hop forever, and every member had carved their own legacy. But behind that legacy was something missing. Unity. The bond that once made the clan invincible had weakened, and in 2004, that bond will be broken forever. Russell Jones, aka Old Dirty Bastard, the wild spirit of Wu-Tang, was gone. He died from an accidental overdose in the studio just 2 days before his birthday, his 36th birthday to be exact. His death shook the clan to its core. The 2000s had already tested their loyalty. Money, egos, and direction had divided them. But now they had to face morality. They were no longer the hungry hustlers from Staten Island. They were grown men dealing with life, loss, and legacy. By 2006, RZA began planning the clan's next move. It has been 6 years since the last group album, The W and Iron Flag. Fans were hungry for another reunion. But, as always, the industry had changed. Jay-Z, Kanye, and 50 Cent were ruling the airwaves. But RZA still believed Wu-Tang could still make something powerful, something different. The result was 8 diagrams, released in December 2007. 8 diagrams released officially on December 11, 2007. The album debuted at number 25 on the US Billboard 200 and at number 9 on the US Top R&B Hip Hop Albums chart. But without ODB, there was a void. RZA left space for his presence on 8 diagrams, even including posthumous vocals. But the spirit, that unpredictable spark, couldn't be replaced. Wu-Tang without ODB was like a sword missing its edge. His death became a reminder of what Wu-Tang stood for: witty, unpredictable talent and natural game. ODB was more than a member. He was the heartbeat of the movement. The 2000s tested Wu-Tang's bond. They faced flaws, tension, and the changing tides of hip-hop. But as the 2010s began, something shifted. The new generation, Kids who grew up idolizing the Clan started treating them not just as rappers but as icons. On December 2nd, 2014, Wu-Tang returned once again with A Better Tomorrow. It was their 20th anniversary, a time to reflect, to honor the fallen, and to prove they could still stand together. The album showcased Wu-Tang and their legacy, a mature, reflective project speaking to growth, aging, and wisdom. It showed that Wu-Tang had survived what few collectives ever do, time. Then came the most controversial moment in their history, Once Upon a Time in Shaolin. A secret, pressed only once, sold to the highest bidder. Part art piece, part social experiment. It was RZA's statement on music's lost value in the streaming era. The buyer, pharmaceutical executive Martin Shkreli, made headlines for all the wrong reasons. Fans saw it as betrayal, but in truth, it reflected the duality of their legacy, a mixture of art, mystery, and conflict. Even decades later, Wu-Tang was still pushing boundaries and sparking debate. Through the 2010s, each member found a new life. Inspector Deck reinvented himself with the Scarface series, a comic book-inspired collab with 7-Eleven and Esocentric that earned cult acclaim. Jizza began touring colleges, doing TED Talks, blending science and lyricism in his talks. Method Man continues to evolve as both MC and actor, starring in The Wire, Power Book 2 Ghost, Luke Cage, and starring in more films and movies alike. Master Killer and U-God quietly released solo project and solid project as well, keeping the Wu-Tang flag flying in the underground. On October 13th, 2017, the Clan released The Saga Continues. The album debuted at number 15 on Billboard 200 and at number 1 on independent albums, having sold 19,000 copies in its first week of release, and including streams, it was 24,000 copies. In 2019, the story was reborn for a new generation. Wu-Tang, an American saga, brought the myth to television, dramatizing their come-up, their struggles, and the brilliance of RZA's 5-year plan. For the first time, young fans could see the early Wu-Tang story unfold. The show is really good in my opinion. Season 1 and 2 captured the essence, the struggle, and the beauty and the bad and the ugly of what everyone in the clan had to go through and finally come together to be as one. Plus, the first episode of Season 1 opened up crazy with Raekwon shooting up Ghost's crib with a tech, and I'm surprised he ain't dropped it because he was firing it non-stop. Now, a lot of people are poking fun at Ash's standards. The actor who portrayed the RZA was doing his voice in Season 2 and Season 3. His voice never bothered me as much, but I do see where people are finding the problem at. Between 1993 and 1997, or the 90s in general, which is what Season 2 and Season 3 captured, the RZA spoke more aggressively and not as a damn mock or teacher. If you look at some of his interviews within that time frame, RZA was not speaking as a monk or like in a deep voice. There's a clip of RZA speaking on MTV Documentary, and if you compare him to how he's speaking to how Ashton portrays him to speak, it is not the same at all.
And so when you start seeing the garbage, you start to determine the difference. And you're going to make a choice. And then when this start happening, it's gonna be another. It's gonna keep growing.
Yo, you was always determined to finish them songs, son. Every time.
I've been having that same surge of determination lately. Just fucking been feeling like I gotta be on my path.
Some of them dudes was rhyming way off beat. You know what I mean?
Well, that's the thing.
But you know, when you have a couple of swords and you put them together. And it makes, I mean, it's the Wu-Tang. It's the slang. It's a sword style of rhyming. God.
But besides that, I really do like the show a lot. It's fun to rewatch and see the ups and downs the crew had to go through in order for them to succeed overall. Also, a docu-series was released with mass appeal and Showtime called Wu-Tang Clan of Mics and Men. And yeah, this has to be one of the best documentaries I've seen in a while. The entire clan sat down in a theater to relive their moments before the fame and money and even themselves at the absolute peak and of course the inevitable collapse. Also, back in 2008, a Wu-Tang documentary was released called Wu, the story of the Wu-Tang Clan, and it's pretty dope. Just like the Mics and Men documentary, you get to see the rise of the clan, them at their peak and the decline. And y'all, when I was watching that documentary and I got to the part where Papa Wu was talking about ODB's death and what led up to it, it was heartbreaking to see. You could tell he had a lot of love for ODB and just wanted him to be around love and the right people during his most vulnerable time after he got released from prison. But regardless, both documentaries were beautifully done and executed. As of 2025, the clan just did their final Chambers tour and it was amazing. Everyone in the clan was doing well and thriving and still continuing to influence the world. Also, Wu-Tang released Black Samson, the Black Bastard Swordsman on April 12, 2015. Also, just 2 days ago, Wu-Tang just announced they're taking the final Chambers tour overseas to Europe, the United Kingdom, United Arab Emirates, and Australia. As the 2000s came to the end, hip-hop itself looked completely different. The industry has shifted from CDs to digital, from labels to laptops, from radio to streaming. But even in this new world, one thing remained true. The Wu-Tang Clan was still here, still touring, still influencing, still commanding reverence from every generation that came after them. By the dawn of the 2010s, a new class of rappers, from Joey Badass to Kendrick Lamar, from ASAP Mob to Flatbush Zombies, were openly paying homage to Wu-Tang's raw, unfiltered artistry. Producers began sampling them again. Streetwear brands borrowed their logos. The W became more than a rap symbol. It was a cultural emblem representing discipline, brotherhood, independence, and knowledge of self. And even through the turbulence, internal disagreements, losses, label struggles, the clan endured. When you look at RZA's evolution into a film composer and director, or Ghost's relentless consistency, or Method Man's acting renaissance, or Raekwon and GZA's lyrical mastery, you see not just rappers, but architects of modern culture. Every member found their own lane, yet they all trace back to Staten Island, the Shaolin Temple that changed hip-hop forever. The Wu story in the 2000s wasn't just about dominance, it was about survival. They weathered the storm of changing sounds and trends, staying authentic even when the world moved differently, and in many ways, their legacy only grew stronger because of it. Every mixtape, every streetwear drop, every local cipher that echoes their sound carries a piece of the clan. The 2000s may not have been their golden age, but it was a decade that proved the Wu-Tang Clan was timeless. They weren't just a rap group anymore, they were a movement, a living philosophy. In the end, RZA's vision came true. Every member walked down their own path, but when the call-out went out, when the swords had to be sharpened, the clan will always return to the chamber. Because Wu-Tang is forever.